just before farmer Evan Hulteen started planting crops in his fields outside Princeton, Illinois last March, he made a risky decision not to grow soybeans. He was losing money on the crop, subject to tariffs amid the escalating trade war with China.
No beans this year for us. After about 3 months of the trade war, it was pretty clear that the president had long-term goals in mind. And at the time, my dad and I talked, and we were way more comfortable with our ability to produce high-yield corn.
Today, a month after harvesting his corn, and almost a year after making the decision to skip soybeans, Hulteen has no regrets.
For harvestability, this wet fall and late fall, corn was a lot easier to handle than trying to get beans out. So in the end, I'm going to stick with it, whether it was maybe the right thing or not. But
even though he still has a few months before his tractors are back in the fields, this year will be different.
We're going to move back to some beans now that the market's hanging in the mid $9 range rather than the upper 7s and lower 8s a year ago. I'm much more confident in our ability to be profitable at those prices.
Those soybean prices are affected by reports the Phase 1 trade agreement between the U.S. and China will curb tariffs and increase U.S. agricultural exports from current levels, according to President Trump, up to as much as $40 billion annually. The potential jump is welcome news for trade war-weary farmers like Hulteen.
I'd say overjoyed to hear some positive news on that front, but yeah, I think cautious optimism is definitely the best way to describe my feelings.
Illinois Farm Bureau senior economist Mike Doherty says Hulteen's caution is well placed.
There's doubt out there whether they can reach $40 billion. That would be a big increase because to get to $40 billion, you'd have to buy a lot of U.S. soybeans. You'd have to buy such a quantity of soybeans, it looks like China would almost have to back off their soybean purchases from Brazil. And that doesn't seem real likely they'd want to do that.
But Doherty says China also needs U.S. crops to support its growing population and expanding middle class.
That's what was driving demand before. It wasn't a trade agreement with China. It was simply their market supply and demand is what was the primary driver of selling U.S. and Illinois soybeans to China. And we'd like to get back to that market-driven demand.
Evan Hulteen would also like to get back in business with China and under Phase 1, sell more of the corn and soybeans he grows on his farm this year. But he's not quite ready to bet the farm on it.
We still know there's a delicate balance here, and China's still China. So yeah, I think it's going to take some hard evidence before we really shake some of the stress that we felt from this issue.
An issue Hulteen hopes the United States and China can avoid once they finalize a permanent long-term trade agreement. Kane, Farabaugh, VOA News, Princeton, Illinois.